This happened to me a few months ago, and honestly, I still go over every detail of that time in my head, as if trying to figure out what exactly changed in me after everything that happened. Although many around me have long forgotten about this episode, for me it's still as fresh as if it happened yesterday. My name is Albina. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a pharmacist at my local pharmacy, the very place where people come not only for pills, but also for simple words of support. I've never considered my job anything special, but it's where I've always found meaning because I truly enjoy helping people manage their medications, soothe their worries, and see a little confidence appear in their eyes. Before I tell the most important part of this story, I must describe my family, because they are woven into my every thought, every decision, and without them, what happened wouldn't have been so meaningful. My parents live in a small house they've owned for years. It smells of coffee, old newspapers, and Mom's apple pie, and even though it's in dire need of some renovation, it always feels like the safest place on earth. My dad is retired and spends most of his time in his chair in front of the TV, loudly commenting on the news and complaining about everything from politics to the weather. My mom, on the other hand, can't sit still and works part-time at a grocery store. Not because she needs the money, but because she needs to feel useful. They're not rich, but they've always managed to make ends meet. And watching them, I realize that the real strength of a family isn't in the amount of money, but in the ability to stick together. I have an older sister, Emma, and even though we're only 5 years apart, I often feel like there's a lifetime between us. She's 34 and already has her own family. She's married to Jake, a guy who works in construction when he can find work. They have 2 boys, Tyler, 8, and Mason, 6, both loud, curious, with bottomless eyes, and I adore them so much that sometimes my heart aches with tenderness when they run to me shouting, "Aunt Albina!" Emma is now 5 months pregnant again, and the 3rd child is already making a noticeable impression, and I know that, despite all the difficulties, she is happy. The difficulty is that Emma and Jake always have money problems. They rent a tiny house right next to my parents' house, and on the one hand, it's convenient because Mom can always watch the children, but on the other, I sometimes see the weariness in my sister's eyes when she counts every little thing at the cash register. Jake's parents sometimes help with the rent, but more often than not, I step in. I buy the kids' school supplies, pay for their sports activities, and even pick up the utility bills when things are really tough. And I'm not complaining. I genuinely want to help, because this is my family, and if not me, then who? The only thing they all liked to joke about was my car, my old beat-up Honda, which had served me faithfully for 8 years. The paint had long since faded in the sun, the driver's door creaked so loudly it could be heard from the entire block, and the air conditioning only worked when it felt like it. "When are you going to get rid of that piece of junk?" Jake would laugh as I pulled up to their house. "One day, that thing will definitely die." Dad would shake his head, as if seeing my car as a symbol of my stubbornness. And Emma, laughing, would repeat every time, "I can't believe you're still driving that shameful wreck." But I stubbornly answered the same thing. I won't buy a new car until this one dies completely. Yes, they thought I was greedy or too stubborn, but the truth was, I'd been saving for a long time and had a decent amount in my savings account. I lived in a small apartment, didn't eat out, took food from home to work, and spent almost nothing on myself. And that's what gave me a sense of pride. I could support my family while knowing I had a financial cushion. And then, last month, my trusty Honda finally gave in. I was driving home after a long shift when I suddenly heard a terrible grinding noise, and then the car jerked as if in agony and stopped right in the middle of the road. Thick smoke billowed from under the hood, and I stared at the gauges in confusion, as if hoping they'd change their minds. But it was all over. I had to call a tow truck, and I took it to my mechanic, hoping for a miracle. He stared at her for over an hour, and then just sighed and threw up his hands. "Sorry, Albina, but that's it this time. The engine is dead, and the repairs will cost more than the car itself is worth." His words sounded like a death sentence. So I was left without a car, and the question of how to get to work became my nightmare. For several days, I took the bus, tired and irritated because the journey took almost twice as long, and during that time, I considered dozens of options. I could have told my family right away, and they would have, of course, made fun of me in their usual manner, but I decided to keep it all a secret. Deep down, I wanted to prepare a surprise, and I knew that when the time came, their faces would speak louder than words. I spent the weekend immersed in my search, browsing cars online until late at night and visiting showrooms where shiny cars, as if on display, smelled of newness and some special promise of the future. I wasn't looking for anything flashy. I didn't need a car that would scream out loud to the whole city. I just wanted reliability, something that would last another 8 years, so I could drive to work without worrying every time I turned the key. But then I saw it, in the parking lot, as if it had been waiting just for me. It was a Honda Pilot, not brand new, but almost, just a couple of years old, and right from the start, it seemed like a car I'd never even dreamed of owning. It had so much space. The interior exuded comfort, and the safety features I'd carefully studied gave me the confidence that it wasn't just for driving, but for transporting those who matter most to me. I immediately thought of Tyler and Mason, how often I have to pick them up from school when Emma is late at work or isn't feeling well, how I drive them to games and practices, listening to their endless stories in the back seat. And now, with a third baby on the way, it increasingly occurred to me that my role would become even more important, that perhaps I'd help transport everyone together, and there would be enough room for everyone in this car. The salesman was honest. He didn't try to push anything he didn't need to. He was upfront about the price, and although it wasn't cheap, I knew it wasn't crazy, but a reasonable purchase. I did the math, calculated everything, and realized I could pay for it entirely from my own savings, without loans, without those months-long payments that make you slack. The paperwork seemed like an eternity, signatures, copies, waiting for each piece of paper to be verified, and I sat there, impatiently fiddling with my pen as the hours ticked away. But by Friday evening, I was holding the keys in my hand and driving home in my new car, and it was a feeling I'll never forget. The seats hugged me softly. Every button worked perfectly. The air conditioning blew cool air exactly when I wanted it to. And most importantly, it was mine. Completely and utterly mine. The next day, Saturday, I decided it was time for a surprise. Every weekend we have dinner at my parents' house, a long-standing tradition that no one ever misses, and I knew that this was where I could show everyone what I'd been up to these past few days. I couldn't wait to see their faces, to catch every emotion, every word. Saturday arrived and I drove to my parents' house, my heart beating a little faster than usual. Emma and Jake's old, battered minivan was already parked on the lawn, as if guarding the yard, and I pulled up and parked my brand new car a little further away, so they wouldn't notice it right away. I sat there for a full minute smiling to myself, then grabbed the bottle of wine I'd brought for dinner and headed for the house. The only thing that was pounding in my head was time to show them what I'd been up to. Inside, everyone was already seated at the dining table. Mom had prepared her usual Saturday snacks, the aroma of which filled the entire house, making me smile as if the food itself were part of the family atmosphere. We sat down, began eating, laughing, and suddenly Emma, with a grin, said, "So, Albina, how's your death trap doing?" I laughed and calmly said, "Actually, my car is completely dead. The engine died at the beginning of the week." "Oh dear, I'm so sorry." Mom immediately leaned toward me, her eyes filled with concern. "And how do you get to work?" she asked. I felt a smile spread across my face, and unable to keep the secret any longer, I said, "Well, I bought a new car. It's parked outside." A silence so thick it seemed you could hear a pin drop fell over the room. Everyone looked at me, as if trying to figure out whether I was joking or not. Emma had already risen from the table. "I want to see this. Now. Everyone, let's go." And we went out into the courtyard. They crowded around my new Honda Pilot. Mom and Dad walked slowly around it, touching the doors and mirrors with their hands, as if checking it was real. "Albina, it's so beautiful and so practical," Mom said, her voice filled with pride. Dad nodded, his face softening. Good choice, baby. This will last you a long time. I opened the doors, revealing the spacious interior. The kids immediately climbed into the back seats, squealing with delight, pressing buttons and peering into every nook and cranny. I showed everyone the car's features, and a glow lit up inside me. Exactly the reaction I was hoping for, but not everyone did. Emma stood a little to the side, her expression hard to read. Not joy, not anger, but something strange, as if she didn't know what to feel. It's very sweet, she said evenly. Jake, on the other hand, opened the trunk without hesitation and whistled. Damn, you could fit a whole family's stuff in there. It's the perfect family car, Jake said, and I could see him mentally calculating how many tool bags and toy boxes he could fit in the trunk. But then his words struck a chord with a chilling undertone. Although, for someone without kids, it's a waste of money. I tried not to show the sting, simply shrugged and said calmly, I have 2 nephews and another on the way. Plus, I like having space. We returned to the house, and the familiar Saturday atmosphere reigned at the table once again. The smell of casseroles, quiet conversations, the children's boisterous chatter. Only Emma seemed to have sunk into some kind of shadow. She picked at her food, barely touching it, casting glances at me that I couldn't quite decipher, and it made me feel uneasy, as if something unspoken and heavy hung in the air. We were almost finished dinner when Emma suddenly dropped her fork on her plate with a loud clink, and the room fell silent so profound that even the children went quiet. She looked straight at me and said, You know what, Albina? You have to give me that car. At first I thought she was joking, but her expression was so serious that I froze, unsure of what to say. Emma, what are you talking about? I finally managed to choke out. She sat up abruptly and said almost solemnly, Think about it. You don't have a family. You don't have children. You earn a decent amount of money and could buy another car. But we really need this car. Our minivan is falling apart. It's already too small for 3 kids, and we'll have another one in 4 months. Your car would be perfect for a family our size. I glanced around at the others, and what I saw made my heart clench. Jake nodded, as if confirming every word, and my parents, to my horror, looked like they were seriously considering this crazy idea. Emma, I'm not giving you my car. I just bought it yesterday, I said firmly, trying to remain calm. But my sister didn't back down. But it makes sense. You're selfish. These words hit hard, and I couldn't take it anymore, snapping back, Selfish? Me? How selfish am I if I just want to keep a car I just bought with my own money, because you need it more? If you need a new car so badly, then sell your old one and get a loan like everyone else. Emma's eyes widened, tears glistening. I can't believe you're acting like this. We're your family and you always help us. And now? Her voice wavered. I'm constantly giving you child support, paying your bills, paying for your gym memberships. I interrupted, feeling anger boiling. So don't call me selfish. That's different, Mom interjected quietly, and her words chilled me. It would really help Emma and Jake. She's right. She needs it more than you do. You're alone. Dad chimed in, adding, You can afford another car. I felt like I'd entered a parallel reality where the people closest to me suddenly decided that everything I'd earned through my hard work and saving should be given away simply because I didn't have children. They all told me to my face that I had to give my sister my brand new car because she was a mother, and I wasn't. I abruptly pushed back my chair and stood up. Guys, I don't believe you. I came here with joy, to show you what I worked so hard for, what I afforded myself after all those years of saving, and you want to take it away from me. Albina, sit down, Dad said, extending his hand. Let's talk about this calmly. There's nothing to talk about. The answer is no. I grabbed my purse and left, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. I got into the car, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, and drove home without looking back. I'd barely had time to change when the phone rang. First it was Mom, then Dad, then Emma. But I didn't answer any of them. I knew too well what they were going to talk about and didn't want to listen to their persuasion again. The calls continued all evening, and when it became clear I wasn't going to pick up, the messages started coming in. Albina, please think again. Emma really does need this car, Mom wrote. You're hurting your pregnant sister. Think about what's best for the family, Dad wrote next. And then from Emma, I can't believe you're being so cruel to me when I'm carrying your niece or nephew. The messages came one after another, and they all said the same thing, that I should help my sister because she's pregnant, because she's having a hard time, because I'm supposedly selfish and heartless. I read each one but didn't respond, and a weight slowly grew inside me that I couldn't shake. This went on for 2 long, exhausting weeks. Every day, as if on schedule, came calls that I ignored, and dozens of messages written with such pressing concern that each one felt like a small prick in my conscience. They kept repeating the same things, that I should think about what was best for the family, that Emma was pregnant and shouldn't be upset, that my coldness was hurting her, that I was being cruel and selfish. Sometimes the words were soft, sometimes harsh, but the essence remained the same. They were pressuring me. And then they decided to drag other relatives in. One evening during the 2nd week, Aunt Linda called me, and her voice on the phone was soft, almost sing-song, as if she already knew what she was about to persuade. "Albina, dear," she began, "I heard about your situation with Emma. Don't you think you should help your sister? She's having such a hard time right now with the pregnancy, Jake's job, and everything else." I felt my heart sink, but my answer was quick and firm. "Aunt Linda, I'm not giving my car to anyone. I bought it with my own money, and I'm keeping it." She tried again. "But dear, this is your sister. She's pregnant, and family is the most important thing, you understand." But I no longer had the strength for such persuasion, and I answered curtly, "The answer is no. I will not change my mind." And without waiting for further comment, I hung up. I was struck by the fact that even my extended family had been drawn into this story, and it filled me with a strange sense of betrayal. I knew I was right. I'd worked for years, saved every little thing, denied myself every unnecessary thing, so that I could finally buy what I truly needed and cherished. And just because my sister had children didn't mean she had the right to take away what I'd honestly earned. I recalled how many times I'd helped them, with school fees, with fees for sports activities, with utilities, all without expecting gratitude. But what I now heard from them felt not like a request, but a demand. After 2 weeks of constant attacks, I felt exhausted, as if I were reliving the same scene over and over again, and yet I stood my ground. I wasn't going to give them my car, no matter how many times they called, wrote, or tried to make me feel guilty. But the guilt wouldn't go away, like a sticky web enveloping me, and I was beginning to doubt whether I really had the right to be happy with so many expectations. And then something happened that I now call a small miracle. My college friend Sarah called, and her voice sounded like fresh air after a stuffy room. "I'm getting married," she said excitedly, "and I really want you to come to my wedding. Please tell me you can make it." I almost burst into tears at how unexpected and timely it was. Sarah lived in California on the other side of the country, and we hadn't seen each other for almost 2 years, even though we'd once shared a room for 3 long years, and she knew everything about me, from my habits to my fears. "The ceremony will be small," she continued, "just my closest family, but you have to be there. You are my family no less than anyone else." I felt a spark ignite within me. This trip was like a lifeline. A few days away from home, away from the constant pressure of family, away from calls and texts, it was perfect. And of course, I sincerely wanted to be with Sarah on her most important day. Without a second thought, I booked a ticket for Thursday evening and decided to return on Sunday. The trip was short, but worth every hour. That Thursday evening, I packed a small bag, putting in a beautiful wedding dress and some casual clothes. My soul felt light, as if I were throwing off the weight of the past few weeks. I parked the car in the lot near my house, as I always did before trips, grabbed my bag, and called a taxi to the airport. My phone rang, and even on the way, I received messages from my mother or Emma, full of reproaches and hints that I was heartless. I stared at the screen but didn't answer. I was too eager for this escape. The flight was surprisingly calm, and when I got off, Sarah was already waiting for me at the gate. We hugged, and in that moment I realized how much I missed her warmth and simplicity. The following days felt like the respite I so desperately needed. Sarah's wedding was beautiful and very modest, intimate, without pomp, but filled with sincerity. She looked radiant, her eyes sparkling with happiness, and her groom, Mark, turned out to be a truly nice guy, attentive, kind, and open. I laughed with other college friends I hadn't seen in a while, and for the first time in weeks, I found myself not thinking about family drama, not feeling the weight on my shoulders, and simply being myself again. We spent Saturday at the beach. I felt the sun and the sound of the surf draining the last vestiges of fatigue and anxiety from me. Then we returned, and that evening the wedding ceremony itself took place, warm, bright, and tearfully simple. Afterward, we laughed, sang, and danced until late into the night in the banquet hall, filled with people bound by love and joy for Sarah and her new husband. On Sunday morning, we all gathered around a long table for breakfast, ate hot rolls, drank strong coffee, and slowly said goodbye to each other as the guests began to leave for home one by one. I felt that this little escape had given me not only rest, but also the strength to stand firm again. The flight home was uneventful. I sat by the window and looked at the clouds, thinking about how, for the first time in a long time, I felt rested and ready to tackle any challenges my family had in store for me. It even seemed like these days had given them a chance to cool off, to look back, and to realize how ridiculous they'd been, trying to take away what belonged to me. I landed Sunday evening around 10 and, having hailed a taxi, returned home, feeling a slight thrill at the thought of how peaceful it would be to be back in my apartment. But when the car pulled into the parking lot, I immediately looked up at my usual spot where my beautiful Honda Pilot was always parked, and my heart sank. The space was empty. "Can I drive around the parking lot again?" I asked the taxi driver, my voice trembling. "I'm looking for my car." We slowly circled the entire area, our headlights gliding across familiar rows of cars, but my car was nowhere to be found. My heart thundered in my chest, my palms went cold. My car was gone, and the thought struck me like lightning. It had been stolen. My brand new car, which I'd owned for less than 3 weeks. After paying the taxi driver, I went up to my apartment, my thoughts racing, colliding with one another, like in a nightmare. I needed to call the police immediately, file a report, but another thought flashed through my mind: surveillance cameras. Maybe I should see what exactly had happened first before I panicked. I quickly went downstairs and knocked on the door of Mr. Peterson, the landlord who lived on the ground floor. He opened it almost immediately, and seeing my face, frowned. "Albina, what happened?" "My car isn't in the parking lot," I breathed out. "Can I see the security footage?" "Of course, come on in." He led me to the computer where the system was set up, and together we began scrolling through the footage from the last few days. I caught every movement on the screen until I suddenly stumbled upon Friday morning around 9. The image hit me harder than any punch to the face. My Honda Pilot was parked in the lot. Jake, Emma's husband, approached it, holding something that looked like a tool. He fiddled with the door, making some movements, and a minute later the door opened. I watched him calmly get behind the wheel and drive away. The alarm was silent. My heart sank. "Oh my God," was all I could whisper. I asked Mr. Peterson to copy the recording to my phone, and he quickly helped. And then I just sat in his kitchen, holding this piece of evidence in my hands, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't a mistake, not an accident, not some ridiculous mix-up. My own family had stolen my car. Not asked, not inquired, not explained, they stole it. They broke in, disabled the alarm, drove away, and probably thought I'd never find out or dare do anything about it. I felt anger boiling through me. This wasn't just about the car anymore, it was betrayal. They'd crossed a line I'd never even considered. "You need to call the police," Mr. Peterson said softly, placing his hand on my shoulder. "Not yet," I shook my head. "First, I want to make sure my car is where I think it is." I called a cab again and gave the driver Emma and Jake's address. The whole time on the way, I kept replaying the video in my head, seeing Jake approach my car, open the door so easily, and drive away as if it were his own. I wondered, how did they even know how to disable the alarm? How long did it take? Who helped them? And then we pulled up to their rented house, and I saw what I already knew, but that didn't make it any less of a shock. My Honda Pilot was parked right in their driveway, brazenly, openly, as if it had always been their car, as if no one had ever thought it was a crime. And I felt something inside me snap. They didn't even try to hide it, and that's what struck me as the most disgusting. I only had to glance out the taxi window to see my car, brazenly parked right in their driveway, as if it had always been their property. And at that moment, my hands shook so violently, I could barely restrain myself from screaming at the top of my lungs. They really did it. They stole my car and parked it in front of their house, as if I were nothing and nobody to them. I jumped out of the taxi and angrily walked to their door, banging my fist so hard it felt like the wood was about to split. And I no longer cared about the neighbors, the passers-by, or the possible scandal. Everything inside me was seething so much I could barely see in front of me. Jake opened the door, and Emma immediately appeared behind him. The expressions on their faces completely killed me. Jake grinned as if he'd spotted an old friend, and Emma stood there with a victorious air, as if she'd just received a long-awaited prize. "Hey, Albina," Jake said casually, as if I'd come for a cup of coffee and not to demand the return of something stolen. I raised my hand and pointed directly at my car, parked in their driveway, and my voice shook with rage. "What the hell is my car doing here?" Emma stepped forward, her lips curled into a smug grin, and uttered words that seared themselves into my memory like a knife. "Well, if you weren't so stubborn, we wouldn't have to take matters into our own hands." Take matters into our own hands. I could barely get the words out, my breath catching in my throat. "You stole my car." "We didn't steal anything," Jake interrupted, folding his arms across his chest. "We just took what you should have given us in the first place. How did you even get involved in this?" I looked at him, trying to figure out how far they were willing to go. Emma smiled, her eyes glittering with a cold satisfaction. "Remember those spare apartment keys you left with Mom and Dad a few years ago? You said, 'just in case.' Well, that was exactly it. We stopped by your house while you were in California and took your car keys." The words hit me in the stomach, and I even stumbled back. They hadn't just stolen my car, they'd broken into my apartment, my personal space, where I never invited anyone without permission. "Give me back the keys right now and get your hands off my car," I muttered through clenched teeth. Emma laughed loudly, deliberately, as if savoring every sound. "I don't think so. It's our car now. You can go buy another one." "That's theft," I said, feeling my voice tremble. "I'm calling the police." "Okay," Emma shrugged. "We'll tell them you promised us a car and then changed your mind." "Who do you think they'll believe? A single woman or a pregnant mother with 2 children?" And with those words, she slammed the door in my face, leaving me standing there with shaking hands and a racing heart. I looked at that closed door and felt rage and distrust seethe within me. They thought they could simply steal what was rightfully mine and avoid the consequences. They assumed I was too afraid of causing a family scandal to fight for what was mine. They were wrong. I called another taxi and headed straight to the police station because at that moment something completely snapped inside me. I was tired of playing their games and tired of being convenient. If they decided to treat me like an enemy, then let them face real consequences, real law. At the station, I explained the situation to the officer at the desk, and he took me to a detective named Martinez, who listened to my story attentively and without asking unnecessary questions. "So, your son-in-law took your car without your permission?" he asked. "Yes." I pulled out my phone and opened the camera footage. I have video evidence of him stealing it from my parking lot. I showed him the video, and the detective nodded, his face calm, but his eyes said he was taking the matter seriously. "Where's the car now?" he asked. "Parked at their house. I just got back from there. They refused to give it back." "Okay," Martinez said. "Then we need you to file a theft report." "Do you have the car's papers?" I pulled out the registration and insurance papers, my hands shaking as I handed them over. "I just bought it 3 weeks ago," I added. "The car is registered in my name." "Great. We'll send a team to seize the car and bring your son-in-law in for questioning," he said calmly. I filled out all the paperwork, signed the statement, and left them Emma and Jake's address. The detective assured me they would contact me as soon as they returned the car and spoke with Jake. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was truly right. The next day, the phone rang, and when I saw Detective Martinez's name on the screen, my heart sank. I already knew the conversation would be serious, but I forced myself to answer, holding the phone with both hands to hide my trembling. His voice was calm, almost casual, but every word struck a chord. Your car is at our station. Your son-in-law has been arrested for theft. We've also called your sister in for questioning, as she admitted to participating in this. Exhaled, gathering my strength, and asked the question that had been nagging at me since the moment I signed the statement. Can I come and pick up my car? Yes, of course, he replied, but then paused and added, There's just one situation you should know about. Your family is here, and they want to talk to you. I drove, even though every cell in my body screamed at me not to, but inside I felt like I had to see it with my own eyes. When I walked into the police station, I was greeted by chaos. Emma was sitting in a chair, her eyes red from crying, mascara running down her cheeks, sobbing loudly so everyone could hear her despair. And my parents were pacing the room like cornered animals, restless, and I could tell from their expressions that another scene awaited me. Upon seeing me, they rushed toward me as if I were the criminal, not the victim. Albina! Mom grabbed my hand, her fingers shaking. You have to drop these charges right now. How could you do this to your own family? My father, frowning, added harshly and demandingly, immediately. This is unacceptable. Emma raised her head, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes blazed with anger, and through her sobs she said, You're a monster. You're trying to destroy my family. I pressed my lips together and said quietly but firmly, I just want my stolen car back. He's going to jail because of you. Emma shrieked so loudly that people turned around. The father of my children could end up behind bars. He's there because he stole my car, I said, trying not to raise my voice. Mom burst into tears too, her shoulders shaking. Please, Albina. Think about the children. Think about Emma's pregnancy. You can't let Jake go to jail over some car. I felt a fresh wave of anger wash over me and I exhaled. It's not just a car, Mom. It's my property, and he stole it. But this is your family, my father shouted, his face red with rage. Family doesn't send family to jail. Family doesn't steal from family either, I snapped, so sharply that silence fell over the room. Just then, Detective Martinez approached us, his voice calm but firm. Miss Albina, we need to know if you want to press charges. I looked at my family. Emma continued to sob. My parents looked at me as if I had committed the crime, and not a single one of their faces showed any understanding of what Jake had done. No one but me saw the obvious here. He had broken the law. I took a deep breath and said, I'll drop the charges, but only on one condition. You all leave me alone. I never want to have anything to do with you again. Albina, don't be dramatic, my mother tried to reason with me. I'm not being dramatic. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm tired. You stole from me. You broke into my apartment. And then you pretended I was the bad person for being upset. I'm cutting off all ties with you. You can't mean that, my father's voice wavered, but I could already see that deep down he still blamed me. I'm absolutely serious, I said coldly. I'll drop the charges against Jake, but in exchange, you will never have any contact with me again. No calls, no messages, no visits. That's it, we're done. I turned to Detective Martinez. I'm dropping the charges. He nodded and left to fill out the paperwork. Jake was released a few hours later, though I later learned he was held for a couple more days for resisting arrest when they tried to apprehend him, and that was perhaps the only satisfaction I had in the whole situation. I returned my car and drove home. That same night, I blocked all their phone numbers, every account on Facebook, Instagram, and basically every platform where they could reach me. I wanted to erase them from my life in one fell swoop. The following months were surprisingly peaceful. There were no endless calls asking for money, no constant reproaches and remorse for not helping enough, no yelling and drama that my sister usually brought into my life. For the first time in years, I could simply live my life, breathe freely, without the daily expectation of what new crisis they would bring to my doorstep. About 5 months after I'd completely cut them out of my life, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number, and deep down, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. When I heard Aunt Linda's voice, I immediately realized she'd found a way to reach me, as I'd blocked all other contacts. "Albina, dear, I have news about Emma." Her voice was soft, but there was a hint of tension. "She's had a baby, a little girl. Your parents wanted me to tell you you have a new niece." I froze for a second, but then answered coldly and firmly, "Fine." I wanted to end the conversation there, but Linda persisted. "Don't you want to know her name? See photos?" she asked, almost pleadingly. "No," I said sharply, as if cutting with a knife. "Albina." Her voice trembled. "Don't you think this has all gone on too long? 5 months. Maybe it's time to forgive and forget." I almost laughed. The very appeal seemed so absurd. "Forgive and forget?" I repeated, feeling my indignation boiling within me. "Linda, they stole my car. They broke into my apartment. They treated me like trash and then expected me to accept it." "But they're your family," she countered softly, as if that should have made it all undo what had happened. "No," my voice shook with anger. "They stopped being my family the day they decided my sister's wishes were more important than my rights." "Are you really willing to lose your entire family over a car?" she asked bitterly. "I didn't deprive them," I replied. "They abandoned me when they decided to rob me instead of respecting my decision." "What about the kids?" Her voice was now full of pain. "Tyler and Mason miss their aunt, and now there's a new child who will never know you." These words cut me to the quick. I truly missed my nephews. I missed their laughter and simple hugs, but I knew I couldn't maintain a relationship with them if their parents continued to see me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. "It's not my choice, Linda. It's Emma and Jake's choice. They decided that stealing was more important than family. Your parents are getting old, Albina." Her voice wavered. "What if something happens to them?" I swallowed, gritting my teeth. "Then I'll read about it in the obituaries." On the other end of the line, I heard her quiet cry. "How can you be so cold?" "I'm not cold," I said calmly but firmly. "I'm just tired of being a doormat. I spent years giving them money, helping them, getting them out of trouble. And the only time I bought something for myself, they tried to take it from me. And when I refused, they stole it." "But you returned the car," she muttered. "It's not the car," I replied. "The thing is, they thought so little of me that they decided they could just take whatever they wanted, and I'd be too weak to resist them." There was silence on the line for a few seconds, and then Linda quietly said, "So that's it. You're never going to talk to them again?" "It's their choice," I said. "They know where I live. They know where I work. If they want to apologize and try to fix it, let them come. But I won't be the first to go to them." I hung up and sat in my apartment, looking out the window where the streetlights were burning, thinking about everything that had happened over the past year. Yes, it was hard sometimes. Yes, I missed my nephews. But I didn't regret standing up for myself for a second. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living under constant pressure from my family. I wasn't dreading every phone call. I wasn't giving all my money to other people's crises. And most importantly, I learned something about myself I hadn't known before. I realized, more than I thought, that I didn't have to tolerate mistreatment just because we were related by blood. They were used to seeing me as a convenient person, someone who would always help, lend, and give. They believed I'd rather lose my car than risk open conflict, but they were wrong. And now they have to live with the consequences of their choices, just as I live with the consequences of mine.